can start. We'll talk about conflicts, and I am Artur Orlov. I was a developer. Before we start, I'd like to ask you this. Conflicts, who thinks that conflicts is evil? Okay. Who thinks conflict is good? Wonderful. Okay. This is where we're headed. Of course, some people believe that conflicts is not a bad or good, but something separate. But let me tell you who I am. I was a developer since 2004, and I was a lead for quite a while. I was in charge of teams, and I was my own small company. I also was Scrum Master, product owner, Agile coach, but I was full stack, so I became a full stack coach. When I looked at what's happening to Agile, I just wonder what they're doing to Agile, or with the help of Agile. So I became a certified conflict mediator and consulting psychologist. I called corporate culture coach. So I help companies and grow good culture. It's not that I'm telling you that everything is wrong here. You need to do this and this and that. So first I'm trying to understand, what do you need it for? What do you want? And then based on that, we start doing something so that the culture become the way you want it. So I've been at SQA days for quite a while, and testing some of the presentations. I like the audience very much. Organization is very good, but the audience is quite advanced. Why am I here? I'm an experienced engineer. I can speak engineering language, and it's an esoterics, and this is a bit strange for outsiders. I can translate it into engineer's language. This is what I owned and learned in psychology and borrowed from psychology. Inability to solve conflict is what happens in company quite often. If we talk about development, it's about conflict, testing conflict, development conflict. So this conflict are quite inherent for companies. This was a disclaimer, just in case I were speaking English, but I switched to Russian. Now, the disclaimer number 2. In conflict science and conflict counseling, there's more than one school, and I'm just one of the schools. There's lots of literature, so you may have seen some of the descriptions, and it may probably contradict your assertions. Arthur Clarke said that there's also a counter-expert for an expert with a totally different point of view. The third disclaimer is more about you. Let's remember that behavior in conflict is practical skill. It means you can develop only if you practice. You have to practice. If you read books, if you watch videos, is not practice. It's not a skill yet. Therefore, your only teacher is your own experience. But experience should be plenty, because there are so many opportunities out there. Perhaps we should talk about conflicts and what a conflict is. Let me hear you first. What do you think conflict is? When opinions are diverse, lack of consent, lack of when the conflict of interest, conflict of goals. Well, how about this state of communication? Active confrontation, and both parties would like to benefit from the state. They want to fight. And we believe that this is a conflict. Two important things for to be in conflict don't have to be conscious. Sometimes I become part of conflict could be the result of my typical pattern of fighting. If I'm just defending everyone, I'm used to this. I'm not just trying to find out why, because I just stay what I am. This is like a habit and lack of understanding that alternatives are possible. Secondly, wolf chasing a rabbit is not, it's not a conflict. Rabbit doesn't want to stay in this conflict. And perhaps a couple of more slides should be added. And the first one, the conflict of war. Where's the boundary? So let's separate those depending on the goal. In conflict, the goal is to prove that I'm right, to come out a winner. In case of war, it's about destroying or disabling the opponent. As far as corporate segment is concerned, if you have a conflict with another member of personnel and you want him to be fired, this is more like war because you want to give him you want to kick him out. So is that conflict or discussion? In conflict, I try to prove that I'm right. In discussion, the goal is to find the best solution. Doesn't matter who offers that. It seems similar, but in discussion, I'm ready to walk away from my stand because for the truth. That's the difference. Good or evil, well, we don't know. Most of you believe that it's hard to say. Is it good or evil? It's part of nature. That's what happens. And there's a conflict science that schools that believe that conflict is a communication bug. So we start a conflict, but I don't think it's not a bug. It's a feature. It's not the communication bug. It's a type of communication used to solve certain tasks. It's quite popular with humans and with animals. There's some peculiarities. Conflict feature number one. There's no trust. While conflict has not ended. You cannot trust an opponent. However, some people say that if you conflict, you should build trust. This is not going to work. You are in conflict because there is no trust. It doesn't mean that you will build trust at the end. So first you should end the conflict, and then you should start doing something to rebuild the conflict. But there is no trust in the conflict. Ways to solve a conflict based on this. You start trusting first. It's not going to work. That's the difference between conflict and communication. Feature number two. It's a different state of mind. You're emotionally involved. It's a different mechanism. And then you have reaction lags. Remember, family conflicts, in 2 or 3 minutes, people start discussing. Remember 5 years ago, you, during the vacation, remember what you did? And people discuss different things and their reaction lags. You're responding later with a lag. If you remember the conflicts, then sometimes something is going through your mind. I should have said that or this. This is the lag because of your emotional involvement. There are also functions. Because it's a feature, what do we need this feature for? And the key is personal boundary protection. This is the only way of identify boundaries. If someone wants to take it away, you're starting conflict. So that's an important feature. Second function is boosting up energy for changes. Do you know the Tachman model? Storming and so on. Quite often, conflicts take place in teams that are inevitable because that's a way for the team to change. The only way. Like there's a team with a lead with roles. A new kid is on the block, and this person becomes almost a lead. And the relationship should change, and the only way of doing this is starting a conflict. So conflict leads to changes. The next function is to speed up evolution and growth. Look at history. Most of the ups in science and technologies was during the conflict or after. It's a way of speeding up evolution. They use it in the corporate world. It's also a way of uniting team. Find one common enemy. When we have an enemy, we consolidate much faster. I'd like to talk about item 1, which is personal boundaries. Take away man's right to conflict, and you will destroy his identity. Because it's not just physical, mental. What I can afford, what I can't afford, and then the identity will just be destroyed, if it works. There are different levels. And it's not that we're going to talk about all of them. First level, conflicts over resources. Like if we had more people than chairs. Like that more people than chairs, and they could be conflicting over those chairs. So that's limited resources. So that's an example of conflict over resources. Second is interpersonal conflicts. It's not that over resources that you're conflicting you personally. Conflicting with a person. They just don't like a guy. I don't like you. A bad guy. That's a second level conflict, more complicated. And the third level, inner conflicts.
The third level conflicts are internal, taking place in your mind, and you don't need anybody else to be involved. We're going to cover first level conflict, most commonly found. For the other kinds of conflicts, you need to have practical skills and mechanisms, bodily and emotional, to get a grasp of. So we'll stick to level 1 conflict or conflicts for resources. It's a conflict about indivisible resources. But I like to dig deeper, dissect it further. This conflict is based on the idea that the resource under review is one and indivisible, but it's only an illusion. As soon as you start digging deep, you will see that you are under the illusion that this is one and indivisible resource. There is always expansion of boundaries taking place. If you visit your boss's office and say, I want to do this or that, or I want to take up this task or procedure, this expands your boundaries, resulting in a potential conflict. What can we do about it? We can start practicing to be more effective at being involved in a conflict as opposed to avoiding conflicts. So let me share with you 6 practical skills that will train you for more effective conflict behavior. First skill is to detect that you're in a conflict state. It may sound absurd, but sometimes you are not sure that you're in a conflict at all. You may be breathing hard, your nostrils may be flaring, but you should be able to catch conflict development early on. There are certain markers of a looming conflict. If you're irritant, it means that you're on your way to a conflict. If it's anger or annoyance, it probably means that you've entered a state of conflict. How can this be trained? I'm going to give you obvious things. Body and emotional awareness. What does that entail? We are trained emotionally in such a way so that we detect emotions only when they have reached a high, uncontrollable level. When there is a buildup of hormones in the blood, triggering a mechanism which is out of control. When we don't have emotional intelligence, we're unable to capture embryonic state of conflict. And if you look at nonverbal representation or markers of a conflict, when you're fumbling with your pen or have some other body language, like you're tilting your head or sort of have a tick in the neck, you need to scan yourself. Do a scan, do a body scan. Try to realize what's happening. Skill number 2, being able to exit the conflict, to bring this emotional pressure down as soon as you can. The way to achieve it is, once you become self-aware, ask for a break, for a pause before continuing to discuss a topic, for example. You can step out of conversation or just leave the room altogether to have a break. just to evacuate that conflict-prone area. Training that is by monitoring your body and emotional responses, trying to behave in a new and different way. Or you should make a habit of asking yourself, what am I doing right now? Be here and now. Ability to answer this question will save you a great deal of resources and time. This is the awareness so much talked about. Skill number 3, being able to ask key questions for yourself, which are, for example, what do I really want to achieve? Just take a step back. So before going at it for a resource, try to remember why you need that resource in the first place and what length you're going to go to achieve that resource, what the cost will be. I like the way it's framed. What's it for and how much will it cost for you? Or what you will have sacrificed. How do you train this skill? You try to become aware about your real goals. Be mindful of that. Sometimes people are taken by surprise when encountered with a question about what you're trying to achieve. Sometimes goals are replaced with some far-fetched pictures. A person may actually be looking for recognition while trying to get an invitation to a conference, for example, from the managers. But there are other ways to get recognized. Ability to put questions, key questions to your opponent. What do you really want? It's not like, hey, hold your horses. What do you want? Conflicts tend to escalate, so you should learn to ask questions like that. And what for? Why you need this? Maybe there is another way for both of you to get what you want. Becoming more empathetic is the way to train this skill. Put yourself in someone else's shoes, your opponent's shoes, to try to figure out or get into his or her mind, trying to frame or build system thinking where you're mindful of a certain frame of reference within which you are conflicting, and there may be other ways to resolve this situation. Next skill is to divide the pie solution. Just imagine 2 kids had an argument, they distrust each other, but then they're presented with a apple pie. How can they share that apple pie if they don't trust each other? Break it in half, 50-50? There is no third party here. So 2 conflicting parties, 2 kids basically don't trust each other. Maybe they should summon outside help, a third party who would do that for them in a fair and just fashion. Half. But there is a delicate point here, fine point here. But how do I know that he can be trusted? Maybe he's going to call someone maybe get a neutral, trusted party. Yeah, that's certainly a possibility, but how can you do it? I mean, arbitration is all about third parties, and in many cases, it is still biased. We simply get a third party with its own bias and own interests. Yeah, you got it. One should cut the pie, and the other one gets to choose which half of the pie to take. That's very important. So you should be able to find solutions that still work, even if there is no trust, where both conflicting parties win. Mutual interests or benefits are clearly understood in a conflict, but not trust. There is a matter of prolonging a conflict. Trade-offs and compromises is simply a way to make this process longer, so then everybody sits and waits for an opportunity to grab that resource at a later date. So it simply postpones the conflict. The way to develop this skill is by thinking creatively. You may have heard about special thinking games. And skill number 6 or skill number 0 is be prepared. When you see a conflict coming, just prepare for it. Make your case. Be ready to answer questions like why do I need this and what I'm willing to sacrifice to get what I want, to avoid the situation where costs outweigh your benefits. How to train? Easy, very easy. Air quote. Know and respect your boundaries well. Your own boundaries sounds evident, but it's not as evident. Many people have to be trained about personal boundaries and know and respect the boundaries of others. In total, first, you prepare for a conflict before engaging in it. You need to have emotional intelligence to monitor your emotions. Then, learn to leave the battle. So have an exit strategy to try to muster strength. Ask yourself key question: why am I here? What am I going to do with it? Ask the same question to your opponent, and sharing the pie solution. It's a simple skill set, very simple, very uncomplicated. Summing things up, I promised you 3 things that each engineer should know about a conflict. Conflict is not a communication failure. Conflict is a special type of communication with special features. There's no trust intrinsic in conflict. You're always emotionally involved in a conflict because conflict is all about emotions. And you will have reaction lags. You will be late in delivering your blow or providing your arguments. And thirdly, conflicts are not manageable. There are a lot of courses for conflict management, but it's not possible because you lag in your emotional response. It's out of control.
But what can you do? You can train yourself to detect conflicts. You can leave conflicts you don't need, like changing the state of mind. At least you can influence. The third skill, you can train unconscious patterns of behavior that can work inside the conflict, like in martial arts, in sports, when it's too quick and you just have patterns to react. So you need to train those patterns. And this makes you more efficient. Inside the conflict, there's no management. The trick about it is if you think he's conflict and you think you're not, that's different. So it's Machiavellian, but you can rise to that level as well. But also important thing I'd like to note, sometimes conflict is the best way to achieve your goal. This is a natural thing in nature. Sometimes it seems to be the most efficient way. And there's nothing wrong about conflict. Sometimes it's the only way. But again, given all this, we're talking about verbal conflicts, verbal communications, and conflict over resources. That's all I'm talking about. And this is an important thing. This is it, all I had to say about it. If you have any questions, please go ahead. Thank you. Hi. So conflict for you is a negative dispute. It's more negative, or is it a point of growth? What is it? I didn't quite understand the first. So let me start with about negative. No, I don't believe that this is a negative thing. I think it's natural. Negative, positive. This depends on the context. Therefore, there could be several answers from the system point of view, or maybe it could be positive, could be negative, and it could be mixed. If I am in the conflict against my will, this is negative, of course. But if I don't know why I entered this conflict, this is not negative. This is just a tool. You talked a lot about exiting conflict. When the emotional state is unmanageable. Why is this about work? And I'd like you to comment this. Emotions and the malice is an engine, is a driver. And when we stifle it down, much may happen afterwards. It's a beautiful question. Give your comments, so you should exit the conflict. No, exit. Don't pen it up. I see your point. This is a very good point. In fact, I didn't say this directly. This is a misconception. You shouldn't be handling your emotions. You need emotions to achieve your goal. Emotions could be drivers. As an engineer, I could say the two ways of using them. First, this is how the body adds energy thanks to adrenaline. And then you can invest more energy into your movements. When you have physical threat to body, like martial arts, fight, sports, when the speed of events is higher than the brain can function, don't fight emotions. Fight or flight, that's how it works. On the other hand, those emotions emerge when there is no threat to my body, but there is a threat to my future. And this is a signal which says, look, there's something that my plans will go askew. like the gasoline sensor tells you it's almost down to zero, and you're just covering it up and disregarding this. I'm not in danger, so this is a signal. So we could think about it maybe later when the emotions go away. So don't fight it. Let it go naturally. It can be expedited. Most of the negative emotions are about adrenaline, cortisol. You can squat, you can shout it in the air. Don't fight it. There's the signal, and you need the signal to go through. So unless you let this signal go through, it'll stay as part of the muscle tension, and you just don't know. Now, for you to know what's happening, the body reacts, and sometimes you get pain, psychosomatic stuff, and so on. Have I answered your question? Yes, thank you. As the resume might say, we exit the conflict not to stifle the emotion, but to live through it and come back to the state when you can now think rationally. Anything else? Thank you. It's been quite intriguing. If it's a war for your opponent and just a conflict for you, what should you do? I think if it's war for one of the opponent and the other one is communicating, this is a war for you as well. Don't try to cheat yourself. Don't fool yourself. Well, we're talking about different levels, and I don't think I should be talking. I have to take some practical experience. The easiest way to be as far away from the source of danger as possible. But conflict science studies conflict. When the war starts, this is beyond conflict. So it's not my expertise. Anything else? This is about emotions. Like you exit conflict, you live through your emotion. What if it just goes over and over again? And each time it's have the same trigger and it pisses you off and you want to live through it, you come back to it, and it goes over and over again. Now, the simplest answer would be go see a psychotherapist, a coach, psychologist, so outside resource. Second way, try to debug yourself. This is more complicated. Make sure you are not in a state affected by emotions. And then start describing what pisses you off and how can I change my behavior if conflict is over the same pattern. It follows the same pattern. This is a system. Like the Pavlov's dogs, the trained one slams the door, the other one throws a mug at this guy, and it happens every morning. So the one that wants to stop it has a way of changing his behavior, so the trigger does not like crawl through the window instead of entering through the door. It's difficult to do it yourself without external help. It depends on how much emotionally you're involved. When you're involved, the stakes are high, then it's easier to think about outside resource. It can work without, but you need then to work with your emotions. Let yourself live through your emotions, but don't let them stay in in the way of your rationality. And one more question. Thank you. This is educated audience. As educated audience, we need to understand preventing is better than curing. Like at this stage, we pick testers, and how can I understand during the interview how much of a conflict guy this person is in front of me? Of course, there will be HR with tests and questions, and someone who has experience can skirt around those questions. I have two comments to make. First, the easiest part is say goodbye to your illusion that you can prevent it. You can. Make it your way is show your ability to enter conflict. There's so many advice given to testers, like learn to say no. If you say no, it's what provokes a conflict. Sometimes the other side would say, okay, I can see that I know there's a boundary. We fear this sometimes. When they enter the conflict, it's inevitable. Maybe a conflict doesn't happen. And the second part, how can you understand how much of a conflict prone that person is? This is a very good question. This is also part of my butter and bread, but there are boundaries. In terms of interview, where can this boundary run? We have different ideas of where the boundaries are, what I should do, what my manager should do, because I have expectations. The easiest way is to agree, draw those lines. You have to spell out things. Some people believe that my boundaries are just everywhere. The very fact of you being here is an act of encroachment. Well, tracing that, talk about important things. I never done it myself. Now I will. Let the interviewee say what is important for him or her. Like if I keep late hours in the morning and show up late, if you feel irritation, then it could lead to conflict.